I tell this to every student that comes in the lab. One of the coolest things about being a researcher is that you are answering questions that we don't have answers to. And so you spend so much time designing the question and going through the process of picking your tasks and writing your protocols and the lengthy data collection process. But at the end of all of that, when you are going through the data set, there's a point in time where you're doing your analysis and you figure out what the story is. And there's that moment in time where you are the only person in the world that has the answer to this research question. And then you get to share that with the world. And I think that is still one of the most exciting parts of research, is discovering things that nobody else knows and then getting to share that with people. I'm Tracy Centanni. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences.
What was your favorite song to play in band?
Oh, Gladiator.
Gladiator.
The Gladiator soundtracks, yes. So when I was in Penn State's marching band, we would have these little, we called them chasers. They were these little like short snippets of songs that you would play like between plays on the field.
Yeah.
And we had one that was from the Gladiator movie, and it was this like short little epic
That's so
little
cool.
bit. And of course, as a French horn player, you get all the best parts in those epic songs. So that was always fun to play.
Okay, so as a Pennsylvanian, what's your go-to Wawa order?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so turkey, Swiss cheese on a plain bagel, mayo, sweet peppers, lettuce.
I didn't know you could get it on a bagel.
You can.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
you can pick the bread. Very, very clutch, key, secret to the Wawa.
Okay, so this question comes from Christy Lewandowski. What's your favorite horse story?
Horror story or horse? Horse story. Okay, that's a very different question. I was like, Christy, why are you asking about horror? Growing up, you know, we learned how to ride with this approach called natural horsemanship. And so the idea is that horses in herds, there's a leader, like an alpha mare, and then they communicate by, you know, body language, so like pushing each other out of the herd and whatever else. And so when I got one of my current horses, she didn't respond very well to being told what to do. She's an alpha mare herself. And as a neuroscientist, I teach learning theory a lot. So we did some work with things like positive reinforcement and all of that. And so we spent a lot of time kind of relearning, like, hey, it's okay for me to ride you, like nothing bad is gonna happen. And there was one point in the pasture a year or so ago where she just like kind of stood, no tack, no halter, no anything else, and just kind of let me hop up on her back. That was just a really nice, calm, quiet moment with her where it wasn't about competing for medals or trophies or anything. It was just about connection with the animal.
So what inspired you to pursue a career in research and academia?
When I was an undergrad at Penn State, I got really interested in forensic psychology. I think every psychology student goes through this phase of doing criminal profiling and, you know, wanting to be on Law & Order SVU and that kind of thing. So I was on this forensic psychology track, wanted to go work for the FBI as a criminal profiler. And the advice is always, if you're gonna go get a PhD, you need some research lab experience. And I remember being terrified of neuroscience. It was the only lab that was looking for undergrad volunteers at the time. And so I remember meeting with a professor and like, I don't like math. I don't want it. This is just like too hardcore for me. And he's like, just join the lab for a little bit, see how it goes. So I joined the lab, and they were in the early stages of a project looking at the brain basis of music. So what does musical training do to the brain? How does it impact your ability to perceive major versus minor, so like happy versus sad melodies? And I remember so distinctly the first time I saw the EEG traces, the little brain waves go across the screen. I was like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. I have to do research in the brain. And so I had never imagined a career in research. It was not something that I was excited about, but as soon as I saw the ability of us to measure what the brain was doing, and especially to tie it to music, which was something that was still so important to me, I was captivated and had to do that.
Can you explain what vagus nerve stimulation is and how it's used in your research?
Yeah, for sure. So the vagus nerve, coolest of the cranial nerves, which is a really dorky thing to say. So the vagus nerve, typically when people think of it, they think about fight or flight. So if you've had my class, you'll know this example already. But if you're a gazelle and you're just kind of hanging out on the prairie, if a cheetah jumps out at you from behind a bush, the vagus nerve is involved in that fight or flight response, so the ability for you to run away and escape the threat. But one of the other things that the vagus nerve is doing during that process is creating a lifelong and emotional memory of that situation. And that's for survival, right? So if you're back in that same location, you should know maybe this is a dangerous place to be and I should be a little more aware or just not go back there, right? And so what vagus nerve stimulation does, at least the way we use it in my lab, is we try and hijack that emotional memory creation mechanism, but we try and use it to give you memories or skills for things that are not life-threatening. We're using it to improve language acquisition, reading acquisition, speech production, rehab after brain injury, and speech and noise perception. And what's cool about the vagus nerve, because it touches pretty much every body system, there are lots of disorders and diseases where the vagus nerve is the perfect target for that. So, we use it for neuroplasticity, trying to create new circuits and teach you things, but there are lots of applications for things like heart conditions, drug withdrawal, rheumatoid arthritis, all kinds of applications.
And what's one piece of advice that you'd like to give your students?
Be curious. Especially today, you have the entire, everything that humans have ever known is in your pocket. You have access to everything. And it's really easy to just kind of take things that you see on the internet or social media or even just in the world kind of at face value. And one of the most valuable things that we have as humans is the ability to think critically and ask interesting questions. And so with this increase in access to the world, I would just encourage students to stay engaged and to stay curious and ask questions and go beyond what it is that you see in front of you.